Good morning to all. Welcome back to our online video class. In my previous session, I already discussed on development of the kidney. In this session, I am dealing with the development of the urinary bladder. We know that the primitive gut tube is an endodermal gut tube. It has three parts. One is called the foregut, midgut and the hindgut. And the hindgut, by the allantois hindgut, again it divided into two parts. One is called the pre-allantoic part, another one is called the post-allantoic part of the hindgut. The post-allantoic part of the hindgut, again it is also known as cloaca or endodermal cloaca. By the appearance of the mesodermal urorectal septum, the cloaca or endodermal cloaca is divided into two parts, anterior part or ventral part, which is known as the primitive urogenital sinus, and the posterior part or the dorsal part, which is known as anorectal canal. And we know that from the anorectal canal, actually the rectum and the upper two-thirds of the anal canal actually develops. And from the primitive urogenital sinus, the urinary system and also the genital system develops. So, this primitive urogenital sinus, it actually again divided by the entrance of the mesonephric duct. This mesonephric duct, it is a mesodermal mesonephric duct. So, by the entrance of the mesonephric duct, the primitive urogenital sinus is divided into two parts. The upper part is known as vesicourethral canal and the lower part is known as definitive urogenital sinus. Today, actually we are more concentrating on vesicourethral canal. This vesicourethral canal is connected with the umbilicus by the allantois. But later, this upper portion of the vesicourethral canal, it actually grows more faster rate and enlarges very rapidly, and ultimately it forms the urinary bladder. But the lower part of the vesicourethral canal, it remains constricted or narrowed, that is from the primitive urethra. And later the definitive urogenital sinus, it again divided into two parts. The upper part is known as pelvic part and the lower part is known as the phallic part, which is the dilated part. Before entering into the vesicourethral canal, the mesonephric duct, it forms a bud and this bud is known as ureteric bud. Later, the portion of the appearance of the ureteric bud and the entrance of the mesonephric duct into the vesicourethral canal, that portion ultimately it is getting incorporated into the urinary bladder or vesicourethral canal. The portion of the mesonephric duct before appearing the ureteric bud and the entrance to the vesicourethral canal, this portion of the mesonephric duct is getting incorporated into the urinary bladder or vesicourethral canal. And with the ascent of the kidney, that mesonephric duct actually it grows caudally and medially, and the ureteric bud it grows cranially and laterally. And ultimately this mesonephric duct it forms the trigone of the urinary bladder. The lining epithelium of the urinary bladder is derived from the vesicourethral canal. Vesicourethral canal is the part of the primitive urogenital sinus and the primitive urogenital sinus is the part of the endodermal cloaca. So, the lining epithelium of the urinary bladder is endodermal in origin, but later though the trigone of the urinary bladder is derived from the mesodermal mesonephric duct, but later that mesonephric duct it is replaced by the endoderm. Ultimately the whole of the lining epithelium of the urinary bladder is derived from the endoderm. And the apex of the urinary bladder is derived from the urachus, and urachus is nothing, actually the allantois it becomes fibrotic cord and form the urachus. So, in fetal life the urinary bladder is connected with the umbilicus by the urachus, but in adult life that urachus is converted into a ligament which is known as median umbilical ligament. And so, ultimately the apex of the urinary bladder is derived from the urachus, and the lining epithelium of the urinary bladder is endodermal in origin, except the trigone which is derived from the mesonephric duct, and that mesonephric duct actually in case of male it forms the ejaculatory duct. And the surrounding structure like the other layers of the urinary bladder like the serosauroid adventitia, the muscular layer, the muscles of the urinary bladder is known as detrusor muscles, and also the connective tissue like blood vessels, they actually derive from the splanchnopleuric or visceral layer of lateral plate mesoderm. 4 important clinical conditions or 4 important developmental anomaly that related with the development of the urinary bladder. One is known as urachal sinus, urachal fistula, urachal cyst, and last one is the exostrophy of the urinary bladder. In case of urachal sinus, the lower portion of the urachus it becomes fibrotic cord, but the upper portion remains patent. So, this condition is known as urachal sinus, but in case of urachal fistula, the whole of the urachus it actually remains patent, and it remains patent, then the urine actually from the urinary bladder voided through the umbilicus. In case of urachal cyst, the upper portion of the urachus become fibrotic cord, the lower part becomes also fibrotic cord, but the middle portion which actually remains patent and forms a cyst, and this condition is known as urachal cyst. We know that by the lateral folding of the embryo, the ventral body wall of the embryo actually closed. So, if the defect occurs in the closure of the ventral body wall of the embryo, then from the umbilicus to the dorsal surface of the penis unopposed or it actually does not close properly, then the urinary bladder actually communicate with the exterior by the defect of the closure of the ventral body wall. So, it is known as the exostrophy of the urinary bladder. Thank you very much.